This is a bonus Saturday question and answer video. We'll actually have another one tomorrow. We've been saving up questions for a couple of weeks now so that we could have 2 on a weekend because the open garden event is happening. So as you're watching this on Saturday, if you're not here or haven't been here, that's what we're doing right now. If you're watching this in the morning as it's published. Thank you guys who have come and participated. Have the open garden t-shirt here that I have on now. And the garden looks really good as I'm filming this. I'm filming this on the Thursday before the Friday night event. So thank you so much for everybody's participation in all things HortTube. Whether you're commenting, whether you're asking questions on this video, you've ordered shirts, you've ordered the weekly garden planner, the Learn to Garden video series, you've come to the open garden, whatever it is. Thank you so much for following along with all of it and the project here in Raleigh. The Learn to Garden video series and the weekly garden planner are both $50 off to the end of this month. So that's about 10 days or something as I'm filming this that I put them on a special sale. The 2 codes are on the screen right now. You can use either if you want to get one or the other, or if you've gotten one and you haven't gotten the other one, there's $50 off either one of them. So thank you very much for considering either the weekly garden planner or the Learn to Garden video series. And we can jump right into some questions because there's no details about the open garden this time, because I've been the last several weeks going over those details in the Q&As. Let's see. Somebody asked, we're looking at plants that are not meant for their zone. They're in zone 8B, 9A, Gulf Coast, Alabama. And there's lots of plants that say zones 5 to 8, advice for pushing higher end of the zone map. So in some cases, it's very difficult to do because the plant actually needs some stratification or some cold treatment during the winter time. It needs to stay dormant for a certain amount of time. Plants have adjusted to the places that they evolved to not be tricked waking up in the spring. So if you get a false spring in January, the plant doesn't just wake up and try to start growing and then end up damaged. So it keeps itself asleep for longer. Sometimes when we move those plants into warmer areas where we don't have winter, they don't end up getting those dormant hours. And so where this evolutionary skill that worked great where they came from doesn't work very well in a place that just doesn't get any winter, and they actually lose vigor in the ground. They'll wake up and you'll notice that they're just not as vigorous as they should be. So that's some cases. And then obviously it could be heat related. I mean, it could be a plant that's just from Northern Europe or Asia or some mountainous place where it's, from 8,000 feet in the Andes or something like that, and that plant just isn't going to make sense at sea level, in Alabama, along the Gulf Coast. And so sometimes it's heat related, sometimes stratification, winter chill related. But there are a lot of the conifers and things you could probably push the limits on in zone 8B or 9A. We've got Colorado blue spruce here in the garden, and we just have it in a little bit afternoon shade, but it's fine. You won't see, it doesn't really, it's probably not the happiest plant in this garden, but there are blue spruce growing around Raleigh. There are Canadian hemlocks. There are, lots of, but typically they're in some place that's getting a little bit of afternoon shade protection from our really, really hot temperatures that we get. So there can be a lot of reasons. It doesn't mean it's not worth a try, and it's not like everything on earth has been tried there. So sometimes it's worth a try, and sometimes just not. I mean, you probably want to do some additional reading on any particular plant that you're looking to push the zone boundaries on. But if it's something that needs to be asleep in the winter, that's probably just not going to work for you as well. Okay. Okay, so they've got 5 acres of beech forest with beech leaf disease, how to treat, what to do. I actually don't know anything about this particular disease. I wrote down the question because some of these questions that get asked on here, I think you're best to contact your extension office in your area or a state land grant university near you that has a horticulture program, or whatever it is you're asking about, because again, I don't want, I answer questions here that are kind of from my 40-year experience in horticulture. Some new disease comes along in a forest, that is for people that are way above my that really know that disease and can really maybe help you in some way or another. Me giving random advice on the internet is not a good idea for some of these things like that. Okay, this is something to probably take. Obviously, you're taking it seriously. You're trying to find out, what's going on. But I think somebody in your area is probably understands this disease and may be able to help you in some way that I feel uncomfortable trying to answer. So that's why I wrote that down. If you get those kinds of things, you're getting sudden oak death, some sort of disease that's just wiping out things, some sort of new thing in your area. Make sure you're consulting with Extension Office and other experts that are working on it, probably at whatever land grant university that's in your area. Let's see. Somebody asked about the brick driveway. How did we install it? Any advice for creating a brick driveway? That brick driveway was already here. I have done brick driveways in the past. You have to lay a really solid base to make sure that it works. What we've had with that brick driveway though is we've had some interesting settling. It settled well, but so it's not lumpy or bumpy or anything. It's completely smooth, but it has sunk some. So whoever did the initial packing there did not do all that good of a job. And when I leave the concrete pad up here at the top, instead of it rolling off onto the driveway, it kind of goes at a just angles off the end of the driveway. So I actually scrape one of the runners on the side of the van when I'm leaving the concrete driveway, which is kind of an annoyance. I want to lift some of those bricks and just make it a smoother transition onto the driveway at some point. I didn't do this particular driveway. I've laid lots of bricks in the past. I like brick as a driveway. I like brick in general. I like using natural materials where I can. So natural stone, brick, those materials. I think, if you see the patio over here, I like, this is all the bricks in that patio are literally found bricks from this property. When you're digging a hole and you find a brick, don't know why the brick was there, have no idea. That's what went in that patio. I've probably found another 20 since the patio was built. So at some point, I'll have enough bricks again, I think, to build something else. All right. Okay, so how are we able to grow coleus with sun-loving annuals? So first of all, most everything in our annual borders and our perennial borders are planted pretty close together. So a lot of times, the top of the plant a lot of times can take more sun than you think, as long as they're not spaced 3 and 4 feet apart. I go so many, I'd almost call it a mulch desert. So many places I see planted where the plants are 5 feet apart. They're spaced for like 10 years of growth. The plants are this far apart, and in between is what I call the mulch desert, where there's nothing in between them. And so for that plant to put roots in the ground and with that dark colored mulch and the sun is cooking the roots on things, it really stresses the plants out. It's just not a natural way for plants to grow. If you look behind me into the woods back there, the plants are this far apart everywhere. They're competing with one another like crazy. But that competition also helps each and every plant back there shade its own roots. So if you see something in this garden and you're confused as to how the sun thing is growing with the shade thing, it's the exact same thing when we're down at the Giberson garden. Ram has planted everything pretty tight in that garden, and you'll be in one spot and you'll go, there's a salvia that needs full sun, and there's a hydrangea that definitely needs some afternoon shade, and there's a ground cover that definitely needs the shade, and they're all growing together, and you're just wondering how it's happening. She's limbed the trees up big and tall, so it gets good light under there, but then everything is kind of protecting each other in that space and allowing some of those shade things to grow in more sun. And there is some breeding out there for some of these things too. We see New Guinean patiens that we always considered shade plants. The sun patiens are definitely fit more into the sun. The Wizard Coleus series, those grow absolutely fantastic in the sun. So there has been some selective breeding for this too. But we put all of our Coleus out in the full sun. Okay, but with root shaded. So somebody said water features are big in the UK. Any plans for one in the garden? I did a lot of water features, and we had the fountain running over there. I've moved it. I've put it away. At some point, it'll find its way back into a spot here in the garden. I built a lot of water features in gardens over the years as a landscaper. I got pretty good at it, but I didn't. You know, they can be a little bit of a maintenance issue if you've got any kind of waterfall type, you know, feature within your water garden. I would like some water noise back out here. I do like water noise from a waterfall, any kind of background noise. You can always hear, there's a plane right now. I don't know if the mic is picking it up. You guys, I know, can hear the train back over here behind me pretty frequently. So we do have a lot of background noise here in the garden. That water noise is good for. But if you'll notice, Steph and I, you know, we travel a lot. And so when I get questions about, do you have irrigation system? Do you have, Big Bird just put a shadow over me. Do you have a water feature? There are certain things that I don't have here because I have a lot of experience with maintaining gardens in 40 years. And so while this garden would appear to be wildly, you know, have a lot of maintenance to it, it has not as much as you would think. I'm picking things intentionally that don't get a lot of issues, that don't spread like mad. There are a couple things out here that need some control, but I don't have a water feature that can cause me some sort of problem or reconstruction of it in some way. I used materials for my patio over there that are indestructible. I didn't lay the brick with the skinny side. I laid the brick on its side, so it's this thick. I build everything and construct everything and pick plants for the lowest maintenance possible, which gives Steph and I the opportunity to travel the most without giving inputs to this garden or asking people to do a ton while we're gone. This person asked, does having many worms in your soil indicate a healthy soil? Yes and no. This is an interesting question. I mean, when Europeans got here, you know, hundreds of years ago, there weren't worms in the northern part of North America because the glaciers had killed the worms. There just weren't worms up there. And things were growing fine. The soils are great soils, and you know, are farmed to this day, and did not have earthworms. So earthworms don't necessarily define a good soil. I think they obviously will give you some idea that you have a functioning soil in some way, because if it was too dry, you wouldn't have earthworms. If it was way too wet, you definitely wouldn't have earthworms. So it probably is some indicator that your soil moisture is in pretty good shape. Earthworms, of course, are good at breaking down some materials and putting them in a form where then other things can use them to feed your plants. So they can be an important component of a healthy soil, but they're not necessarily 100% that. The plants in the north had mycorrhizal relationships where beneficial fungi, beneficial bacteria that was alive in the soil brought nutrients and water to those plants, and they didn't really need the earthworms to break down material and refeed them. So you basically, they were getting what they needed out of rock, the rock dust and the glacier soils that were there. So you don't necessarily have to have them in any way, shape, or form. That's my point here. And I don't want to go into crazy amounts of details. It doesn't necessarily mean anything, but if you're trying to do what I'm doing here, which is break down mulch and not, I don't want any other inputs other than the mulch and the wood chips and the other things I'm putting down in this garden. I kind of need some larger life like earthworms to be breaking some of this material down and putting it in a form where it can be fed to the plants in the future without putting down other types of fertilizer. That's what I'll say on that. But it's not necessary. You don't necessarily have to have them. You definitely don't have to have them. Let's see. Does the cool spring influence when to take cuttings? Yes, I took cuttings of several things down to Jason Stevens. I have several plants that we're in the process of now moving to the nursery growing phase of selecting some plants that that Steph and I will name at some point. You guys are aware of a camellia over there, but there are other things as well that we'll be in the process of naming if they pass the next stage. They've been good in the ground, but we haven't put them in any kind of production yet, whether will they root easily, will they grow easily, that kind of thing. So we will be introducing some plants at some point. Don't know what those are yet. But when I was taking cuttings the other day, I did notice that some things aren't hardened off quite as much as they normally would be at this point. This would be a pretty good example of it. This Alyssium parviflorum has 4 inches of still very, very tender growth here. So this is the time to get started on it. I'm noticing this camellia has hardened off enough that I could go ahead and take it. This Alyssium still has very softwood cuttings. So just from an observational, when I was taking cuttings the other day, some things were ready, some things weren't. I would have expected everything to be ready by now. So yes, the cool spring has slowed a few things down. And just if you're going to be taking cuttings, just make sure, I don't want to take this old dark wood material, and I don't want to take this super juvenile material out here at the top. I want to take these semi-hardwood cuttings. They're the easiest thing to root overall. These other things will root, not saying they won't, but this semi-hardwood cuttings, I'm not quite at this year's growth becoming semi-hardwood yet. Okay, all right, on that particular plant. But this camellia looks like it's ready. This other Alyssium looks like I could take cuttings on it right now. Okay. Okay, so this person has a wet spring is creating issues with root rot and water logging in Charleston. The beds are holding water even worse than they usually do. They got clay soil. They amended it and they've got things raised up. So if things look off color and you've had a really wet spring, it doesn't necessarily mean you have full root rot. It may be just that the roots down at the bottom. So if I take a 3-gallon container, which is 14 inches tall, something like that, and I plant it down into this clay soil. So when I take that plant out of the container, it's got 14 inches of roots on it, right? When I plant that thing down in this clay soil, if I dig it up in 6 months, the root growth is almost entirely going to be going this way, and the bottom 4 inches of roots will probably be dead on it. Okay, so it's not abnormal to lose the bottom part of the roots that are sitting down too deep into your clay soil. Okay, and that the new roots are going to come this way. Now what could happen is you plant something and then that bottom 4 inches dies really quick because it was just abnormally wet and the plant just didn't transition well, so they look a little rough. But as long as they're not going into a full wilt and just dying, I think you're probably going to be okay on most of the things. So root rot will just kill it. They would just be dead if you had 100% lost all the roots down in that soil. If they just seem to be struggling and not, keeping up with what you thought, how you thought they should have performed, that could be that you've just lost some roots down in the very, very bottom. But since you planted them appropriately and got the crown up out of the ground, you likely have living roots up in that top part, and your plants hopefully will grow out of that. But if it was full on root rot, your plants would already be dead. Dead. And not what looks like partially dead. Let's see. Is planting trees and shrubs into turf really bad? How about unprepared beds? Will I regret not removing grass and weeds? They don't have much time available. So what you would regret is not removing things like Bermuda or zoysia or centipede or St. Augustine grass. So if you're in one of the hotter areas in the country and you got warm season grasses, if you start planting into that, I think you may have a hard time getting rid of that material in those beds in the future. If it's fescue or bluegrass or just some random annual weeds that your turf is made out of, you can probably get away with planting into it and just giving them a small amount of space that's not grass right up to the bottom of the plant. I've seen people do that. Just plant right into the turf and then later just turn that turf area into a bed. As long as you're planting them properly, it shouldn't be that big of a deal. Again, it's not ideal to space plants way apart, and have the heat really hitting them hard individually. Here, there's not anything here that's just sticking out in the full sun anywhere in this garden at all. It's another big bird up above me. So that's kind of my answer. Yes, you can plant directly into it, but if you plant into one of those warm season grasses, I think you'll regret it later, because you'll have a hard, how are you going to get the Bermuda grass out from, if I just had planted these plants in a Bermuda grass lawn, there'd just be Bermuda running through here right now. It's too shady back here, not a great example, but if I had somewhere over there in the sun, that's what will be going on. Make sure it's the appropriate turf, that you can kill later. You can also, if you wanted to, go ahead and just cardboard over that area or something, and then just plant into it, so that you're killing a little more of the grass than just the area you're planting in. Okay, new garden beds to be created. They pulled sod that was mixed with landscape fabric and dirt. What can they do with it? That has to go to the dump. So if it has any kind of plastic material in it, it would go to the dump. If you had just soil and grass, obviously you could just take it and mound it up somewhere in your garden, you know, and make a little berm someplace and make something interesting out of it, right? I mean, no real reason to throw it out. I mean, if you could just pile it somewhere and create some sort of interesting raised planted space, that's what I would do with it personally. I don't need it to leave the property because it's, you know, perfectly good soil in all likelihood. And then if you just flip it upside down and then stack it on top of itself, you'll kill 90% of that grass. But the plastic in it is concerning. You know, if it has that little plastic mesh that they hold, that keeps the sod held together, at that point it needs to go to the dump, because it's got trash in it, basically. It's literally trash. Let's see. What is the conifer, white wedding and blueberry? Okay, what is the conifer between the blueberries and the white wedding hydrangea out by the front? It was in a video the other day. There's a blue boulevard cypress out there. Really love that blue boulevard cypress. It's gotten, gosh, it's almost 5 feet tall. Boulevard grows kind of tall and narrow. It's one of the blue conifers that we can grow here. I can see it from here, and it's blue from this distance. Okay. The color of the little raspberry butterfly bush is amazing. Do we color grade videos? Sometimes I will, and I don't know what the lighting is going to be like here. I usually just will change the lighting if I change anything. So I don't do a lot of what I would call color grading, because I would mess the video up. I can assure you, I know nothing about color grading at all. It would probably look like Clown College, like I've talked about the garden being called Clown College. But that's how that little raspberry looks. But sometimes I'll end up in a slightly dark place that I didn't intend to, and I'll brighten it a bit, but not really changing the color so much. So can a gardener create a hibiscus standard in zone 8A, even though they die to the ground? So I don't know what type of hibiscus you're talking about. I'm assuming you're not talking about a tropical hibiscus. There are tropical hibiscus that you can buy this time of year in the whole country. That are standards, where you buy them, basically it's a hibiscus on a stick, right? And the ones that bloom all summer long. I don't know if you're talking about one of our native hibiscus that die back to the ground every year, because they tend to come up multi-trunked. And I guess you could just get it down to one if you wanted to. It seems like a lot of work. And you want them to build energy through the summer. So having 3 or 5 pieces coming up with those big leaves on them probably will feed that plant a little bit better. So I don't know. I really didn't know what type of hibiscus. I mean, even Rose of Sharon is called hibiscus. I doubt that's what they're talking about, but it's a hibiscus as well. But you're in zone 8A. The tropical hibiscus don't just die to the ground, they just die. There's a difference between dying to the ground and just being dead. So I'm guessing you're talking about one of our native hibiscus that just, you know, when we get a frost or a freeze, retreats to the ground. They come up a little later in the spring. We've got a couple of them here. Yes, I could cut them down to a single trunk if I wanted to, and stake them and turn them into something interesting each season if I wanted to. Okay, roses. I had this question I think they've asked this question a couple of times. I don't know how it ended up not getting written down, but now it is. Don't see any in our videos, any recommendation on them. All they see is drifts and knockouts. There are lots of great roses out there. I mean, you know, I appreciate going to places and seeing interesting roses. The Raleigh Rose Garden is in our neighborhood, and you know, it's really nice. I think it's back in full bloom again. You know, they let that come into full bloom, then they tend to do massive cutbacks all at once, and then it comes back into full bloom again. And it's quite beautiful over there. So when you say you don't see any roses here in the garden, I do have, let me see, I have Indian hawthorns. That's a rose. I've got things in the rose family that are rose adjacent, but I don't have any actual roses. We have had a couple in the garden since we've been here, but I've never been a giant fan. Again, when I get the question about the water feature, you know, I kind of said in that answer, I'm going for the least amount of maintenance possible to have the biggest impact. And this is just from a lot of experience, but I also have interesting things here. So that kind of a three-part triangle, you know, of trying to have interesting things, but that don't get out of control and don't have disease and insect problems typically. Okay, so that's kind of my triangle that I'm trying to stay inside of, so that Steph and I can get in the van and go someplace for 6 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever. And so that's part of the reason that I don't have a lot of roses here in the garden. And I mean, there are enough drift roses and knockout roses in this neighborhood without me having any. You know, another thing that I try to do is not have everything that everyone, you know, that's every other house. Just on my street, there's probably 10 knockout roses that I could walk past right now between here and my street's only 5 houses long. So they're not underused, that's for sure. So, you know, again, you know, but have fun with what you like to do. If you like roses, you're into roses, absolutely go get climbers and hybrid teas and interesting ground cover roses and go for it. I would recommend that you plant them within a larger garden framework and not, you know, that Raleigh Rose Garden, there's a lot of spraying going on. I'm sure there's just a ton of spraying going on, or they're using some sort of preventative systemic insecticides and that kind of thing when they're basically from the ground up, you know, just from watering them. So there's a lot of that going on. That's another thing I'm trying to avoid, is I'm trying to avoid spraying anything at all. So I think your roses would overall be healthier within a garden that is, I happen to have some roses in my garden, okay, and not I have a rose garden. That's when the inputs really kick up. So there you go. That's my take on that. This person used potting soil, one of the many potting soils with fertilizer in them, which is almost all of it, to pot up a redbud seedling. Notice brown hairy fungus on the top of the containers when they watered, and it created a brown smoky plume. Is it safe to use or throw it out? Yeah, you just got some sort of fungus, that probably one of the dog vomit funguses that will cover it. You probably didn't notice it when it was yellow or orange or something like that, but once it browns out, then it has that, those spores get released, and it's when water hits it, the spores just go out and up into the air. They probably get carried up into the atmosphere and get carried all over the place. And so, you know, that's how those things get basically all over the world. But you know, you want to put them, if you do have one of those funguses and you're messing around with it, you probably do want to wear some sort of mask or something. I wouldn't want to breathe in a ton of that stuff, but there's nothing wrong with it whatsoever. I will warn though against putting woody plants in potting soil. So if it's a heavy peat-based soil, you know, you can definitely overwater. So make sure if you're using one of the potting soils to mix some pine bark or some sort of chunky material into it that will allow it to drain a bit better, just in general, because probably that material stays wetter, and that probably was helpful in the formation of that fungus as well. They have a backyard of Bermuda and weeds. What is the best time of year to cover it and kill it for a clean slate? And could they do it with mulch? Would a sod cutter help? So you could get a sod cutter and flip it upside down if you wanted to, you know, and if you did that, you'd want to do it on a super, super hot day. Here's the problem with Bermuda though, it roots very deep into the ground, and so there's no sod cutter. If you put the sod cutter on a really deep setting, but then the sod's going to be so heavy that it's going to be hard to flip over. So if you wanted to, you could go get a sod cutter, cut the sod and just flip it upside down, and that will, and do it on like a 93-degree day. full sun, 93-degree day. That will help. That would put a dent in it for sure. But if we're being honest and we're not, you know, just going out of our way to not say chemicals, I would spray this. This is the thing. So if, let's say you put down, you cover it in boxes, or you cover it in plastic, or you get a sod cutter and flip it upside down, whatever you do, if you kill 95% of it, that's not success with Bermuda. You need to kill 100% of it. Otherwise, you're going to be in a cycle pulling it forever. I've got a little spot out by the road out there. I cannot eliminate it. It's in some perennials and we just pull it constantly. It's just been impossible to get rid of once you got into the project, and I hadn't noticed it before. So this is the thing you spray. You know, and it would only take one spraying. If you went out there and scalped it off on a hot day and then sprayed it once in the heat of the summer, you could do away with way more than you could ever do away with all of these other techniques combined. So you don't often hear me talk about spraying, but Bermuda grass is going to outlive cockroaches, and it's best to start with a clean slate. Otherwise, you'll be frustrated for a long time. Okay, who writes plant tag info? There's inaccurate and contradictory info on the same plant from different growers. Yeah, it's the people that are obviously, you know, I do work with plant development services. Obviously, that's the Southern Living Plant Collection and Encore Azaleas and Butterfly Candy and Better Boxwood and the Sunset Plant Collection, who you guys have seen some videos from the Sunset Plant Collection this year. They own those 5 brands and they write the tags in-house. Most of the stuff in those brands, though, are unique to them. There's some things in the brand that overlap into other companies, but for the most part it's unique to them, so they've trialed them in some way, and so they're reasonably accurate. I'm going to tell you that I'm looking at a tag as a 5 to 10 year span. So if you see something on a tag, if I see this soft caress mahonia, if I see this gets 2 to 3 feet on the tag, I'm guessing that's what the tag says. That plant, I've said many times, this plant's not going to read the tag, okay? And it's going to continue to creep up in time. So what I'm saying, 2 to 3 feet is a reasonable, at 10 years, you could have kept it that size easily. But at some point, it's probably going to creep up above that. Dwarf Yaupon hollies, every tag is going to say 3 to 4 feet in height. There's a 7-foot one in the neighborhood. I should show it off at some point. There's a 7-foot tall Dwarf Yaupon holly. It's 7 feet wide and 7 feet tall. Never seen one even close to the size of it. But it's one that never got pruned. So would you buy a Dwarf Yaupon holly if I said on the tag that it gets 7 feet tall and 7 feet wide, but I was selling it to you to put under your 3-foot tall windows? Although it is probably one of the better choices to put under your 3-foot tall windows, you would probably not buy it. So there's that too, right? Where you know, if I told you the ultimate height of the tallest individual amongst every plant, if I told you this Florida Sunshine Elysium right here, the original one at Juniper Level Botanic Garden is 15 feet tall and 12 feet wide, something like that. If I put that on the tag, that plant's 25 years old or more, 30 years old. Yeah, so there's that, okay, where the plant, it's more of think about the plant tag this is the size I can maintain it for a reasonable amount of time. I said this in many consultations, I consider perennials to be things, you know, herbaceous perennials to be things that need to come out of the ground every 3 to 5 years and be divided and rejuvenated. So that'll be hosta, I've got a cast iron plant here, hellebores, any of those kinds of things. Every 3 to 5 years, you probably need to pop them out of the ground, divide them, and refresh them. Shrubs, I can tell after about 20 years that most shrubs are just tired in the ground. Some can be cut down to the ground and be completely flushed back out and work absolutely fantastic get you another 3, 4, 5 years out of them. Some just don't, and they need to go. And then trees, hopefully we're planting for a much longer period of time than that. So that's kind of my thinking on shrubs, is that what the tag means is for the next 10 years or so, I can keep it this size, probably out to about 20 years, something like that, but with some maintenance. But it's going to get taller than that because the plant's not going to read the tag and it's going to continue to grow. There's just no way. The plant doesn't stop growing. So it's a difficult situation. Now, the fact that one company is going to label it one thing and one company is going to label it something else. I mean, if my nursery's in Michigan and my growing season is 4 months or whatever, and then I'm growing it down in Alabama and my growing season is 8 months, or 7 months, that's a big difference, right? And that plant's going to get larger. I've seen some Weigela tagged that 3-4 feet that get 8 feet here, would get 8 feet in my garden easily. And not only 8 feet, but they get there in 4 years because we just have a much longer growing season. So there's that too. It could be regionality, the regional issue with the tagging, but it's hard to, you want to sell the plants. It is a business. And if I put the tallest one on the planet, if I put that on the tag, nobody's going to buy it. This person bought Imperator and one called Red Baron, and now they read it's invasive in rare instances. They're up in Ontario. Should they take it out, or is it generally okay? That stuff can really cover some ground, and so it's one of those things you can monitor. It becomes super thick and chokes everything else out if it does kind of become invasive, is how that stuff grows. So it's really about monitoring it. If it's sold in your area and hasn't been completely banned in your area, it's probably one of those things you can plant and monitor, I would say. I planted one Mahonia in this garden a couple years ago, and I didn't talk about it on the channel, and I immediately got some seedlings under it. And I was like, nope, it's got to go real quick. So, there's plants in this garden that I'm monitoring for that. There are Mahonia. Belii is very invasive in the neighborhood. This was not a Belii. This was another Mahonia that typically is not invasive, the seeds doesn't seem to be viable in the garden, and it was seeding. And I was like, oop, that's got to go. I don't want to be the person responsible for that, for sure. So monitor it is the best thing I can tell you. Or if you're nervous about something, get rid of it. Again, if 90% of your worries going into 10% of your plants, then those 10% should disappear. Okay, last question for this Saturday one, and then immediately tomorrow, there's like magic. I hope that I have shot the next one because I've already got the questions written for that one as well. If they do the wood chip method, do they use cardboard or just simply 6 to 8 inches of wood chips? So I have this side lot over here with the native garden has Bermuda grass, liriope, mondo grass, English ivy, you name it, it was over there. All of those things can climb through 6 or 8 inches of wood chips. And so there's going to be some things popping up over there, and already is a few things popping up over there. So if you're concerned, it would be how aggressive are the things that you're trying to smother as to whether or not I would use the cardboard or not. If I could have cardboarded that whole thing over there, it probably would have been better off with what I was trying to accomplish, because that cardboard, while I waited for it to break down, it would have slowed it will slow that process down a hair of getting those wood chips, because they're not in contact with the actual ground, right? Which I'm trying to get the ground awake. But that cardboard would at least smother those weeds temporarily, then the cardboard would break down, get out of the way, and then the system could start. That's probably the way that I would have best handled the situation I had because of the aggressive nature of the things I was trying to kill. So if you don't have, if you're trying to kill fescue, you can probably mow it to the ground and put the wood chips on top of it, and very little of that fescue will probably get back up to the top of that. If it's Bermuda grass or liriope or something like that, it's coming up through it. So the cardboard might be the best method for you. Again, the weekly garden planner and the Learn to Garden video series are both $50 off through the end of the month. Thank you guys so much. If you came to the open garden and you're seeing this video now, or just watching the videos is enough. Any participation that you guys have in this channel is, it's all amazing to us. The opportunities we have, the invitations, that I get, you want to be the keynote speaker at the National Maple Society meeting. That came from you guys. It's not, yes, I have 40 years of experience in this. And so I put a lot of work and time and effort into hopefully being able to answer questions like this. But then you guys are the ones that kicked it kicked it through the goalpost, and are the reason that, I get emails like that. So thank you guys very much.